Welcome to Question Time. Tonight we're in Belfast. On tonight's panel, Robert Buckland, senior backbencher, previously Solicitor General and until last year, Boris Johnson's Justice Secretary. An MP for Sinn Fein since 2019 and former Lord Mayor of Belfast, John Finucane. Emma Little-Pengelly, former advisor to Ian Paisley and an MP for the DUP, currently a member of the Stormont Assembly. Peter Kyle, an MP since 2015, brought onto Labour's front bench by Keir Starmer, now Shadow Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, and leader of the Alliance Party and Justice Minister at Stormont, Naomi Long. Good evening, welcome to my panel, welcome to our audience here in Belfast and of course welcome to you at home as well. Do join in the conversation in the usual way on social media at BBC Question Time and we'll see what you've got to say on tonight's topics. OK, our first question tonight is from Chris McEldowney.
Was Rishi Sunak silly not to agree to introduce a windfall tax on energy companies sooner?
Right, so of course there's been a big announcement today about a windfall tax or a temporary targeted energy profit levy, as it's been called. Rishi Sunak said it would be silly to act now when we don't know exactly what the situation will be in the autumn. That's what he said previously, and of course he has now acted. Peter.
Of course he was, and you're all paying the price for it, because 5 months ago Labour proposed this plan to Rishi Sunak, and he said no, it would be silly. Every single day since, the cumulative effect on households is £53 million that you shouldn't have been forced to pay. That's the price of their indecision. We have Boris Johnson saying it's not Conservative. We have other Tory MPs saying it's communist. And as recently as last week, Tory MPs, including Robert, voted against the windfall tax. And today it was delivered. Now, this is Labour putting forward a plan, leading, and the government following. This is a government that is not in control of its own party and it's not in control of our country. We now need them to go further. We need them to cut the VAT on energy. We need them to cut some of the rates on small businesses. We need them to start investing in some of the things that are going to transform our economy and get it going into a strategic way for the future. Bear in mind that if wage growth had continued along the lines it had under the last Labour government, people on average earnings will be earning £11,000 more today than they are. That's because we have a low-growth economy, high interest rates and high tax. The economy is not being run properly.
We've had a pandemic
They deserve
as well.
better. You've had a pandemic, we've had challenges, but the fact is that right before the pandemic, public services were on its knees, 4.5 million people waiting for NHS, 46,000 people waiting for their day in court as victims. You know, public services were running to the ground before the pandemic and the economy was run poorly and growth was double under Labour before the pandemic in the years running into it. That's the fundamental challenge we have.
Robert, was Rishi Sunak silly not to agree to introduce a windfall tax sooner?
No, he wasn't, because what he also said was that he was going to keep reviewing the position. And as we know, events have intervened in a very dramatic way to make a difficult position even worse. We know about the increase in the energy price cap, and we see another one coming down the line in October, which has been one of the main drivers for this change. But we also, between January and now, have had the beginning of a war in Ukraine. We've had further lockdowns in China. We've had international effects on inflation that have really caused this crisis to get worse. And I think in response...
But this all happened before last week, so why did you vote against it last week and you're in favour of it tonight?
Well, no, because last week Labour put forward their proposal. What we see today is, frankly, a windfall tax. I'm prepared to call it that. But it is a better and stronger proposal than one of the Labour Party. But it is, Peter, because actually this proposal raises £5 billion in a year. Your proposal only raised £2 billion. It also contains an important incentive on these companies to invest in the future of energy, to make it greener, and they will get a significant tax incentive from doing that. So this proposal, whilst you can call it a windfall tax, actually I don't care what you call it. It's about the effect that it will have. And what it does is help fund a £50 £15 billion package, which is real support in terms of real money coming down the line to every family in this country, and particularly for those who are most vulnerable and who are going to really feel the effect of this price spike in the months ahead.
Exactly what we said 5 months ago before winter.
But it wasn't,
Emma.
Peter. It wasn't what you said. You said something different.
Emma.
Well, I think regardless of what has happened in the past, and we can see there's been this squabble about the issue, I think we can all welcome that it has finally happened today. This was something that was in the DUP manifesto 6 weeks ago. We met with the Chancellor and we emphasised that we felt that this should happen, because the reality is these companies weren't doing anything to really earn these profits. This was a result of sort of a byproduct of the rising cost of energy generally. So therefore it's right that these companies shouldn't be able to get these obscene profits at a time where ordinary people are really struggling to pay their bills. But I think the key thing here, regardless of the history of this, is that now that it is happening, that this windfall, the money that is collected from this, will be going in the right direction and targeted at the people who need it most. We know as we come into the autumn, these bills are going to go up. Many bills are going to go up, but we don't want our pensioners, those who are worst off, having to choose whether they want to heat or eat. That is just not acceptable in the United Kingdom in 2022. So look, we need to all work collectively and make sure that these monies that are raised from this measure announced today are going in the right direction.
The woman at the very back in the glasses.
I think, in my opinion, it's typical Conservatives. They have knew what was coming with the Sue Gray report, and this is just something to deflect. They have to have something better to deflect from Partygate and the disgrace that they are as a government.
Okay. The woman over there in the green with your hand up, yes.
Here?
Well, I'll come to you in a minute, actually. I was going to the woman in the green dress, and then I'll come to you.
I was wondering how Northern Ireland will get the money with no executive in place.
Right, we'll come on to that in a minute. And the woman in the glasses.
That was my exact question.
You're going to ask the same?
Yes.
OK. So what we have at the moment is the money is coming to Northern Ireland, but there's one aspect of it, the energy bill support payment, which has been doubled from £200 to £400. At the moment, there are discussions about how that is going to get paid to Northern Ireland, because it will not automatically come, because the Assembly is not sitting. John.
Well, I think in answer to the original question, there should have been a windfall tax much sooner than today. It's a very belated recognition of what people have been feeling in their pocket and in their homes for a very, very long time. We have called for a windfall tax. I think any mitigations that will help, as announced today, are low-income families, pensioners, those in receipt of disability benefits, is to be welcomed. But it's already been touched on from the comments. The reaction from our caretaker finance minister today to the Treasury's announcement is to immediately engage with them to figure out how that money can get into the pockets of people here who need it. Because the reason why it can't automatically go into the pockets is because we have no executive. And I actually was very surprised to hear Emma speak about how important cost of living is, because if it was that important, we would have an executive, we'd have ministers round the table, and money would be released and going into people's pockets.
Okay. Say to the man here in the white shirt.
Little-Pengelly made the comment that the companies that are making the money because of the rise in price. What does the panel think with the green energy? Is it going to be windfall tax? Because they're making money as well because of the rise in price.
OK. The man behind you in the dark blue.
I was going to, reflect on the other person's comments about the timing of it. It's throughout the pandemic, this government's acted too late, and they've really only acted now, which again is too late because of what was announced yesterday with the windfall, with the Sue Gray report. It is nothing to do. If the Sue Gray report hadn't come out, we wouldn't be getting this windfall tax. That's it. They voted against it last week. It's 7 days. I know it's a long time in politics, but we've all got long memories.
Naomi, I'm going to come to you in a minute. Robert, you just want to answer that question. There's two people have raised it now.
Look, I think...
Specifically about timing.
I think if we hadn't announced it today, Parliament goes into recess for another 10 days, we wouldn't have had an announcement until the 6th of June. Frankly, I just want the government to get on with it. I'm sorry, you're entitled to have a cynical view of it. I don't particularly have a cynical view. I think the reality is that we saw some of the debate going on about the merits of a windfall tax. There clearly was an issue about whether or not it would be right to single out this particular industry. And frankly, the mechanism, the precise mechanism that we now have, took a bit of time to sort out. But we've had the announcement, and I think it's most welcome.
Naomi.
Well, I try hard not to be cynical about these things, but I think that, you know, a blind man on a galloping horse would see this for what it is. And essentially what we have here is the government wanting to deflect from a bad news day yesterday and coming forward with a package of measures today that will hopefully get them some good publicity. And to be fair, I actually welcome the package of measures that have been brought forward. I think it's too little, too late in some instances.
So you don't think
but
it
I
goes
do think
far
it's
enough?
important. I don't think it goes far enough, and I think the reason that I say that is because I think that if you compare, for example, what has been done today in terms of the profits that have been made, it is a relatively light touch windfall tax in comparison to some of the extortionate profits that have been made during this period. And bear in mind also,
it's 25%.
It isn't only the energy companies that have benefited from that windfall. The Treasury has benefited too from all the VAT on the rising costs of fuel. The Treasury has benefited from the pain of people. So it's right that that should be redistributed, and I'm glad that it has happened. But I think for Robert to try and convince us here this evening that it had absolutely nothing to do with the Sue Gray report and the outcome of it yesterday, I think really stretches credulity to its limits.
You're on the corner there in the white top. Yes. Yes, you.
My parents are actually disabled. My dad is sick. And we're all on low incomes. And as far as I know, Northern Ireland isn't protected by the energy price caps.
No, it's a different system here.
Yeah, so we're frankly terrified of how we're going to be able to afford our bills.
So how is it affecting you day to day?
I'm ill myself. I'm on universal credit, and I have to choose whether I put my heating on, whether I have dinner.
So that's what you're doing at the moment?
Yeah.
You're skipping meals as a result?
Mm-hmm.
That's a disgrace. Shame on the Tories.
Shame on them. Shame indeed.
I'm sorry to hear that. Yes, the man here in the blue shirt.
Whether it's to cover Boris Johnson or not, and whether the executive are sitting or not, when the money comes across, John, you sat outside Stormont for 3 years, so you can't say anything about the DUP. Get the money to the people that need it.
Okay. The man in the stripy shirt at the very back.
It's just Johnson's government trying to buy forgiveness from the population. That's all it is. It's trying to buy forgiveness for the rotten things that you've done while you've been there. All the sleaze, the scandal.
What, the 400 million, the 400 million we spent on COVID?
200 grand on
what about all
bloody
the
wallpaper?
jobs? No, what about all the jobs that the government saved during COVID? What about the 400 billion that was spent by the government to save jobs and to save the economy? What about the interventions that this Chancellor and this government made? You don't ignore what this government has actually done to help people, and to sit there and to say that we don't care, just, I'm afraid to use Naomi's point, stretches credulity to breaking point.
You voted not to feed hungry children. That is disgusting. Disgusting.
But
talking about free school meals.
Robert, there was also £11.8 billion worth of fraud because of lax standards in Treasury. Why don't you, rather than writing that off, try and recover some of that money and use some of that money to start helping people in need?
Peter,
and the other thing you could do is actually cut
VAT
on energy straight away, and that would help people instantly. You know, these are the things you could do straight away, rather than having overcomplicated, costly schemes. It takes you 5 months to drag it out of government.
In fact, their scheme is more generous than what you were suggesting.
No, we suggested it 5 months ago, and if we'd done it, actually would have got us to this point. So, the point is, they could have acted in time. But rather than accusing the audience of being cynical, it is absolutely extraordinary that you don't see the cynicism in today's announcements, straight after a day when Boris Johnson was dragged to his knees because of his squalid behaviour throughout the pandemic. Don't ask for credit for Boris Johnson through the pandemic when we now know what he was doing. The culture. There were people throwing wine up the walls. They were sick and vomit in number 10 Downing Street.
Peter, all I'm seeking to do is to try and get some balance here, and you ignore the point that the government had already announced £22 billion of intervention into the economy to help.
And most of that was for national insurance compensation.
Most of that was to compensate for the tax rises. Thousands of people are going to benefit from a national insurance tax cut in July. This wasn't something that was just thought out of the air. aware, this is another stage on direct interventions that the Chancellor has once again made. And
I'm sorry.
To refer to the COVID crisis because the government did what it took.
You cannot get away with saying that the national insurance is a tax cut because you are reducing what you put up 6 months ago. You're reducing what you've already put up, and then also most of the money released today
What I need to stop,
to compensate.
hang on. What I need to stop is this being a debate solely between you two, because we have an audience here and other people on the panel. So let's hear one more contribution from the audience. The man at the back. Yes, sorry.
2010 to 2014, the price of crude oil is about the same price it is now. 2010 to 2014, we were paying about $1.30 a litre. It's now, as you're driving tonight, it's $1.70, $1.80. How can you let that happen, which affects everybody? And if it's affecting that, what else is it doing to other industries? You're allowed to put your prices up by 25% and make obscene profits. There is something fundamentally wrong by you not intervening and doing something about that.
Okay. Robert, I'm gonna move on. Before I do, I'm just going to tell you where we're going to be next week. Oh no, next week we're taking a break, of course, because it is the Queen's Jubilee. Yes, indeed. But after that, the programme is going to be in Dorking on the 9th of June, and the week after that we're in Newcastle. So if you are in or around Dorking or Newcastle and you want to come and be part of the audience, we'd love to see you. Apply on the BBC website. You'll follow the question time link there and you can come and be part of our audience. Right, let's take a second question now, which is from Rowan Wise. Where are you? There you are.
The protocol undermines our cherished position of equal citizenship in the United Kingdom. Do you agree?
So the Northern Ireland Protocol you're referring to there, Rowan, what do you think?
I absolutely believe that it does.
And why do you think that?
As long as that one of the basic principles of sovereignty of any state is free trade between the constituent polity of that state and the British mainland and Northern Ireland, we're one and the same, and there needs to be no trade borders within the United Kingdom. That's an absolute red line, and Stormont should not be operating unless and until not words but action happens. And the protocol
Okay. Cheers and boos in equal measure, I'm hearing from our audience here. Emma.
Well, look, I know people are in very different places in relation to this issue, but I absolutely agree with you. For me, as a unionist, it fundamentally fractures the United Kingdom. I don't believe that is good for Northern Ireland. I don't believe that is good for the United Kingdom, quite frankly.
Do you just want to explain to people who aren't here in the audience, who perhaps not quite so familiar, the fact that you're refusing to take part in the Assembly because you want the Northern Ireland Protocol to be completely changed?
Yeah, so that's a key ask of the Democratic Unionist Party. We've listened to people across Northern Ireland, unionists who feel very strongly on this issue, and we need to get this addressed. We have been talking about this issue for over 2 years, and it has been ignored by the European Union, it's been ignored by London, it's been ignored by Brussels, and unfortunately, look, it grieves me that we are in this situation now, but we're only in this situation because there hasn't been solutions put forward, there hasn't been that agreement to the changes that need to happen. It's not just about the United Kingdom and the Union, it's also real issues that will impact on everybody. We need to remember about 90% of the protocol isn't even in place yet. About 90% of the protocol, there's grace periods, there's been suspensions of that. Now, when you look at what this means if there was to be full implementation, you can look at the EU report from June of 2021, and that sets it out. Personal luggage would be checked, huge amounts of goods would not be able to come here without huge swathes of paperwork and cost. That cost is going to be passed on to the consumer in a cost of living crisis. Now, people say get back into Stormont now and sort out cost of living, but this is something that is going to happen. It is going to hit like a tsunami in the autumn if we don't get this addressed. It is really serious, and that is why, sadly, the DUP have taken this position now, because we have been dismissed, demeaned, disregarded, as have the views of huge swathes of unionism across Northern Ireland. We need to get this addressed. All parties have recognised there are some problems with the protocol. It is clear that there's already problems. 500 million a year is being spent on paperwork by the Trader Support Service already. So these costs are just going to grow. Consumer choice is going to be limited. The medicines issue still isn't even sorted out. 2 years of talking. Enough is enough. We need to get this resolved now.
Robert, this is, of course, the Northern Ireland Protocol agreed by the Conservative government.
Yes. Yes, and I think that Emma's evidenced already some of the considerable tensions that exist. And I think it would be irresponsible of the British government to ignore that, to sit on its hands and just say, well, tough, we're going to have to just wait and see. Because what has happened here is that the mechanisms by which were set up in order to negotiate how the protocol could work are just not coming together. And that's, I think, I don't want to play a blame game tonight. I don't think it's right to do that. But the simple fact is
presumably you don't think it's the government's fault?
Well, no, because the government consistently tries to negotiate, but our counterparts in Europe won't change the basis upon which they want to negotiate. That's a matter for them. But that does lead to a problem, leads to an impasse here. And there is evidence that this is leading to a problem, and it's leading to a direct challenge to East-West trade and to the sort of dislocation I don't think was in anybody's minds when this agreement was reached. And therefore, it's the duty of the British government, I think, and it did last week, to signal that it would be prepared to take action to legislate at Westminster in order to deal with this problem. Now, I think that should be a last resort. I still believe in the power of negotiation. But I'll say this. I think there's another agreement here that is more important, and that's the Good Friday Belfast Agreement. And that, in my mind, takes precedence over the protocol, and therefore the protocol should be interpreted without any prejudice to the vitally important process that started here with the consent of the people of Northern Ireland and the Republic in 1998, and which any British government has to work night and day to uphold and maintain. And that's why I think it is right for the government to signal that it is prepared to take action on the protocol.
OK. Listen, I just want to come to a member of our audience, Katie Hayward. You're sitting there. You're a professor of political sociology at Queen's University here in Belfast. Unusually, we've asked you to come and be part of our audience. I suspect, like many of the people at home, unlike our panel, I'm sure, you have read every word of this protocol. I'm sure you can all recite it verbatim. What's your assessment, in terms of what Robert's saying here, and to a certain extent Emma, is what we're seeing now in Northern Ireland something that we could have expected, given the way the protocol is worded, or is it actually being interpreted in a different way?
Well, it was quite clear what the protocol meant, in that it did mean checks and controls down the Irish Sea in order to avoid those on the land border. That's absolutely clear. And as Emma mentioned, we do have the Trader Support Service and other functions supported by the government to facilitate that movement across the Irish Sea. However, we need to put it in context. We aren't facing a tsunami, as Emma puts it. There are grace periods existing at the moment with the agreement of the UK and the EU, and that was deliberately, first and foremost, they were there to enable people to adapt to these new arrangements.
I think, what Emma, you were saying that there will be a tsunami if all the checks come in. I think that's what you were saying.
Yes, so if we come to an end of the grace period with no agreement, then certainly, if they were fully enforced, there would be significant disruption.
And is this what we should have expected all along, or not?
Well, in terms of, well, we should certainly have expected adjustment to trade, and I think part of the problem in January 21 was that there wasn't proper preparation. What we have seen since then, all the surveys show, is that we have had adaptation. And so over 2/3 of businesses now, according to the Northern Ireland Chamber Quarterly Survey, say that they have adapted well to the new post-Brexit and post-protocol arrangements, and only 8% of businesses say they're finding significant challenges. And this is why businesses are saying, we do need the UK and EU to talk. Any unilateral action is suboptimal. We need a negotiated outcome in order for the certainty that businesses have been asking for such a long time.
John, does the protocol undermine the cherished position of equal citizenship in the United Kingdom?
No, I don't agree with the premise that the protocol is an identity issue. I think it's a trading issue. It's worth repeating the fact that the protocol was as a result of a very painfully long set of negotiations since the Brexit referendum, which I'll remind people, if they need reminding, people here didn't vote for. But when those who championed for Brexit, like the DUP did, and for those who rejected every manifestation of Brexit the way the DUP did, I think it's a bit rich to then complain about the outworkings of a political movement that you backed from the very outset. The protocol is not something that was imposed by the European Union upon the United Kingdom. It was an agreement that was negotiated. It was an agreement that was then entered into by the two partners. It was legislated for. In fact, Boris Johnson won an election solely on getting Brexit done. And in fact, if we cast our minds back to 2020, we were told that customs checks in the Irish Sea wouldn't alter the constitutional basis of this jurisdiction one bit. That's not my words. They're the words of Jeffrey Donaldson. We were also told that this had enormous economic potential. Again, the words of DUP representatives at that time. And that is the truth. This allows a small jurisdiction unique access to 2 markets. When I'm in Westminster, I talk to Scottish colleagues who say quite literally they would give their right arm for the economic position that we find ourselves in. Now, are there problems with such a fundamental trading shift? Of course there are. Is there ability to solve those? You better believe it. And contained within the protocol are the mechanisms to identify problems and then find and implement solutions. But you will only do that if you have 2 people willing to negotiate with each other in a credible fashion. And frankly, the British government have been found wanting in that regard.
Okay. Man there in the black T-shirt.
The DUP, no. Theresa May had a better deal. So
with the backstop?
With the backstop, like, so what do they want? They don't come up with solutions. They just come up with no. Maybe it's time they get back into their jobs, they get their paid for. She's not even elected.
Emma, I will come back to you. Yes, the man here.
I am a unionist and I find myself agreeing with John and challenging Emma because 2 days ago the head of the CBI said that the protocol gave Northern Ireland manufacturers a competitive advantage. He said that lots of businesses in Northern Ireland were finding it a big bonus. Both he and the president of the Chamber of Commerce in Northern Ireland have said that the lack of an assembly, the lack of an executive is hurting business and it urgently needs addressed. You're the guys who are dragging down the assembly. Why?
Okay. I will come back to you, Emma. There's a lot of questions directed at you. Naomi.
I think it's clear when you listen to business that the biggest impediment facing business at the moment is political instability. And that has always been the case. And the government at times play fast and loose with our political stability here. I mean, I listened carefully to Robert saying the importance of consent. Where was consent in Northern Ireland for Brexit? Where was the concern about the impact on the Good Friday Agreement? When the majority of people in Northern Ireland did not consent to that change. Instead, the government not only ploughed ahead with Brexit, but ploughed ahead with the hardest form of Brexit. And the protocol was designed, not something that I supported, but was designed by his own government as a soft landing zone for Brexit, in order that Northern Ireland would be as insulated from the difficulties that Brexit was going to create in terms of trade friction. It also presents us with opportunities, but the only way we can actually exploit those opportunities to balance the negatives is if we get back into government and start working together to deliver for people. What businesses need is an agreed solution. They need an agreed way forward. We are pragmatic around the protocol. If there are ways that the protocol can be diminished in terms of its impact, then let's grasp that with both hands. But what we can't do is throw the protocol out, because without the protocol, the entire trade and cooperation agreement between the EU and the UK is put in jeopardy. And that will have major impacts for everyone in terms of creating potential trade war and inflationary pressures. Now, we need to think long and hard about whether we want to layer upon layer the challenges that people are facing, or whether as politicians we should be sitting down rationally looking for solutions to make life easier for the people we represent.
Okay, I will come back. The man in the red T-shirt. The man in the red T-shirt there.
As a unionist, I agree with most of what Emma has said, but I don't think in or out of Stormont's going to do anything. We've seen this week we can't trust Boris to act, and talking to the EU has been like talking to a brick wall. They're not going to budge.
Okay. And the man towards the back in the white shirt.
I'd just like to say, I noticed there Naomi Long was saying about the protocol and about the issues with it. It wasn't so long ago that she was calling for the rigorous implementation. And another point just to make is, I mean, everybody's quick to point to the DUP for bringing down Stormont. Was there not another party that brought Stormont down not so long ago? And Michelle O'Neill was the health minister at the time. There wasn't much concern for the health of the people of Northern Ireland then.
Right, obviously you're talking about Sinn Fein.
If I could come back on that specific
briefly, because I
point.
need to bring Emma back.
And I will come back briefly. The issue around rigorous implementation was in specific response to the fact that Robert Buckland's government was standing up, the Secretary of State saying they were going to break the law in specific and limited ways. Now, if you think it's okay for government to break the law, then you can't really complain about the farce that we've seen over the last 48 hours with the government that thinks it's above the law and can do what it wishes.
There was no condition. There was no condition on rigorous implementation.
And the law is respected.
Let me bring Peter in, because you've not yet answered the main question. The protocol undermines our cherished position of equal citizenship in the United Kingdom, which is something, Rowan, that you clearly feel very strongly.
Well, I'm in the strange position, as Labour is, because we voted against the protocol. Robert says that people, couldn't have understood how it would be implemented. Actually, we did. We read it before we voted for it, and we saw what the implications were going to be, so we didn't want it to go ahead in that way. But something crucial changed. It was signed into law, international law. So really, now the circumstances have changed because of that. We know that Boris Johnson doesn't have a personal regard for the law. We know that the government breaks the law, both domestic and international. But we do. So the only credible way forward is now to negotiate and establish functional negotiations with the EU so we can move forward. The only way to smooth the challenges we have with the protocol is to work with the EU so the EU changes its law. We can't negotiate, open up negotiations, because you need your partner to agree to doing that. But what they have agreed to do is to look at ways that they can change European law to take certain issues out of the protocol altogether. Now, that's on the table. The UK government says it wants to do many of these things. The DUP and all the parties at Stormont say that they want to do these things. So these are negotiations that are failing because everybody agrees they want progress. It's absurd. The way forward is going to be statecraft, diligence and graft. All of the things that Boris Johnson and his government have shown they cannot deliver. On the thing about consent, if I might, but
briefly.
On the thing about consent, it is an issue because of power sharing for legislation within Northern Ireland. Consent doesn't apply to Westminster. 3 times in her statement, Liz Truss said that she needs to pull out of the protocol because it now doesn't have consent within Northern Ireland. Well, the DUP, to their credit, did vote against the protocol in Westminster, so it didn't have consent at the outset, so nobody was listening to them then. This week in Parliament, just 2 days ago, the government introduced legacy legislation which will grant amnesty to terrorists from the Troubles. Every single political party in Stormont from both communities have voted against it and stood up against it, and the government's going ahead. Where is consent then? They are playing fast and loose with the Good Friday Agreement. They pick it up when it suits them, they put it down when it suits them, and today Brandon Lewis is in Belfast. Where is he? He's not here to speak to you.
Emma, let's come back to what there was a member of the audience here was saying. Actually, what's not helping business is the DUP not being at Stormont and not having a functioning executive rather than the Northern Ireland Protocol.
And as I outlined, the DUP has taken this step after many years of trying to talk, trying to negotiate and trying to get this changed. Sinn Fein brought the Northern Ireland Assembly down and kept it down for 3 years on a matter that was important to Sinn Fein. Now, I understand that the protocol and Northern Ireland's place in the Union is not important to Sinn Fein, but it is important to Unionists. But the Unionist concerns have constantly been dismissed and demeaned by all of the other parties. We are told constantly that we don't actually feel the way that we feel, that Unionists aren't really worried about this. Naomi Long's party did put out without condition asking for rigorous implementation. Now, people are saying, we read the document, we knew what was coming down the tracks. Can Naomi Long really say to the people here today that she knew that somebody with a guide dog would not be able to bring that dog from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, that we would not be able to get access to medicines from our biggest medicines market of Great Britain, that sausages and chilled goods would be stopped coming over the border, despite the fact that this is the protocol
of Brexit,
but
Emma.
this is a result of the protocol, and that's the reality,
it's the result
and we have to be honest about that.
It's the result of Brexit, and unlike your party, we didn't deliver Brexit. We didn't deliver
a hard
Brexit.
respect, Naomi, you've spoken, and I'm trying to respond to
Naomi,
I'm trying to respond.
Wait a minute.
Okay.
Briefly, a bit more from you, Emma, then I need to bring you. Hang on. Whoa. You can speak now.
Okay.
Naomi, I'm sorry, we've heard from you twice, forgive me. John, briefly from you. and then let's hear from you.
Look, we can keep going back to Brexit and having the squabbles that everybody's been having for years, or we can get around the table and try to find solutions, because medicines issues, pets, plants, business, no, this has to be resolved because for this reason.
Hang on, wait 1 minute. Just in case people can't hear, Emma, just in case people can't hear him, what the general shouting is you need to get back into your job and and take your place at the Stormont Assembly.
And the reason why not is because whenever the DUP were in government, and we kept that going for 2 years, the issues and concerns were entirely dismissed. They were dismissed.
Okay.
We are still waiting on resolution from the European Union on medicines, life-saving medicines for the people of Northern Ireland.
John, briefly from you. We're not going to move on.
We need to get solutions.
I've two.
Don't go back.
Don't go back.
Don't go back.
I've two quick points. It's been referenced in.
Tell you what, John. Sorry, you're saying don't go back.
Don't go back.
Because lots of people are saying that the DUP should get back in.
No, clearly don't have the same political view as I do. When John Finucane tells me that my place within the United Kingdom is safe, I'll go home happy tonight. Not. When he did. Sorry, this is the question.
Well, the courts have ruled differently.
Right.
Go on. Make your point.
Secondly, when David Trimble...
Read the judgment.
Hang on, let's hear from Orange. That's why they're here, and we want to hear your voice.
When David Trimble, the co-author of the Belfast Agreement, says tear up the protocol to save the agreement, I tend to listen to David, even though I politically don't agree with him all the time. So that... No, sorry. We're talking about the question, which is about our position within the United Kingdom. That's why the DUP and all the other unionists have a problem with the protocol, not about Brexit, about our position within the United Kingdom.
And you feel it threatens your position in the United Kingdom? Yes. OK. Would you like to answer?
Yeah, look, there's a couple...
Very specifically.
Yes, and I will, but there's a couple of points, and I am going to answer your question. In reference to the Assembly's collapse previously, it was as a result of financial scandal, which was squarely at the door of the DUP. And within a year...
Which should have been worked through. Irish Language Act, Irish Language Act.
If I can finish the point, Emma. Within 1 year of that, we had an agreement with the DUP to go back in, and they walked away from that. Now, 2 points.
No, you said you're going to make two.
Yes, I know, and I'm going to answer. Yes,
and then to that.
And to be fair, I had an additional question put to me. Sometimes we speculate as to what the people think. Well, 2 or 3 weeks ago, we found out the vast majority of people who cast their vote at the ballot box return parties that support and recognise the protocol as being necessary to protect us from the worst impacts of Brexit. In answer to your question, the only thing that is going to change the constitutional basis on this island is when there is a referendum, as legislated for in the Good Friday Agreement. Our Court of Appeal, our High Court, and soon to be the Supreme Court.
Wait a minute. How do you persuade this man who feels that his position is threatened by the
I'm not going to patronise him by persuading him. He has his view, and it's not a case of me not listening.
Well, it's not just me.
I respectfully disagree.
Sorry, it's every other unionist that has a problem with the protocol.
But not all unionists would say that everybody else needs to be held to ransom, that we have no executive.
The
Ulster Unionist Party would go in. So when we hear stories like we've heard tonight about cost of living, when we look at our health service, I don't agree with anybody that says everybody else can just suffer because we have a problem with an agreement that the British government and the European Union entered into willfully.
Wait a minute. I want to hear Emma. Wait a minute. I want to hear a bit more from us. Thank you, sir, for your contributions. Yes, the man here at the front.
If Liz Truss takes the legislation through, or there's a negotiation between the EU and the UK, and you get the assurances you need for the customs and the moving of goods, will you go back into the executive?
That's a yes or no question. What's your answer?
The DUP is a party of devolution. We want the Northern Ireland Assembly to work.
No?
So yes, we have to look at the proposals coming forward, and if they meet the 7 tests that the DUP have set out, then yes, then there is a pathway to restoration. But we need to be sure that this is going to happen, and the protocol is going to be addressed.
The woman here.
I was just going to go back to the comment that keeps being made about Sinn Fein collapsing the executive before, and that's obviously wasn't great either, but that's the thing that really makes me so fed up about politics here. It's all about whataboutery. They did it first, Stebbins, whereas we just need to get on and do stuff. Like, that's not going to fix the health service, it's not going to get people jobs, houses, and It's just really depressing.
If I might-
all the
okay,
time.
No, in fact, none of you are going to say anything because I'm going to move on. But thank you very much for your point. Right, because otherwise we won't talk about anything else on this programme, and lots of you asked about other things, so it is my duty to try and get through those questions. OK, let's have one from Sinead Tumulty. Where are you, Sinead?
I'm right here.
Great.
Hello. Following the publication of the Sue Gray report, which is more important, being able to say goodbye to work colleagues or loved ones as they die?
Robert.
Being able to say goodbye to loved ones as they die is clearly far more important, and all of my friends and people in this audience and outside who went through that experience will feel it very personally when they see people who make the laws break those laws. It's plain and simple.
But Boris Johnson said he felt it was his duty to say farewell to colleagues, which I think is at the heart of your question. Shiv, tell me if I've got that wrong. He felt it was his duty to say goodbye to work colleagues, whereas other people were not allowed to say goodbye to their nearest and dearest.
And I think the answer to that is that there is a time and a place, and that wasn't it. Because we were living under restrictions, all of us in varying degrees in different parts of the country, different times of the crisis, but the restrictions were very clear and they changed our lives. And
so was Boris Johnson right to say that it was his duty to say farewell to colleagues?
I think that he clearly, he and the team in number, he and the team in number 10 clearly got it wrong. And
so he was wrong to say
from day one,
farewell
I've said that what happened
colleagues.
was wrong, and I think that what should have happened was that they should have said, well, now is not the time. If all is well, in a year's time, however long it takes, then perhaps after the end of the pandemic, when the restrictions are gone, we can do it then. That's what so many other millions of people have done with their lives. They've postponed weddings, all sorts of events, commemorative events.
So just to be clear, so the Prime Minister was wrong when he said he felt it was his duty to say farewell to colleagues at the time?
I think it was wrong. And I think that we have seen that report, which was pretty damning. She didn't pull her punches at all, as I thought she wouldn't. She's a very independent-minded person, of course, well known in Northern Ireland as well, with her connections here. And she produced a very thorough and hard-hitting report. The question for me, frankly, is what are the consequences of that? And I know a lot of people are saying, well, come on, Robert, you've got to make up your mind. Should you call for Boris Johnson to resign? I've given it a lot of anxious thought. I asked him a direct question on Wednesday. I asked him whether he deliberately lied to the Commons. He denied that he deliberately lied to the Commons. He's given me a direct answer, and I accept that answer. What I would be interested to see is what happens with the Privileges Committee. Of course, we're going to look at that very issue. But he has been asked a direct question by me. He gave me that direct answer.
And did you believe the answer?
And as I said, I accept that answer. Am I happy about the situation? No, you
Can I just point out the obvious? Can I just
but
point
at the
out,
same
Robert,
time, I think...
Let him finish.
Well, hold on, Peter. I think I was in government at this time, and I can tell you I had not a Scooby-Doo and any knowledge about what was going on. And when I heard about it, along with the rest of the country, because I was out of government by then, I was as shocked and appalled as everybody else.
You're being asked, have you submitted a letter?
I don't do letters. If I think
a letter
somebody should resign, I would say publicly. I don't do skullduggery and plotting.
Robert, if I could just quickly point out the obvious. You've come to Belfast, the place that Boris Johnson came and said, over my dead body will there be a border down the Irish Sea, and then went and legislated for it. And you said that you believe every word he says.
Well, I didn't say that, did I? I asked him a direct question. He gave
you don't believe every word
he gave a direct, gave a direct answer to the people of Northern Ireland.
Hang on, let Robert
Look,
answer.
I worked in government with him for the thick end of 2.5 years. There's a lot of things that we did together which worked very, very well indeed. And I'm not going to list them now, but they are clear and for people to judge. And therefore, I do, having worked with somebody, when I ask them a direct question, I expect an honest and direct answer. And I had that on Wednesday. Okay. And the Privileges Committee will look at that direct issue.
John?
Yeah.
Yes, and the electorate as well.
John?
I think that this is a man who is devoid of trust, no matter what side of the political spectrum you come from. But I think the reality as well is, depressingly, who is really surprised? You know, this is a man who makes and breaks agreements. He acts in partisan and unilateral fashion. And I think the only positive thing that I can think to say is that he doesn't have a mandate here. He has no representatives here. He is certainly not popular. And as I said, it was disgraceful behaviour. And I think he has shattered and lost any ounce of trust that he has from the public, certainly people here.
Okay. The man in the blue jacket.
Yeah, I think we can see how the Conservative government make their decisions. It's kind of like the amnesty that we talked about. As long as you believe you're telling the truth, well, then you're telling the truth.
Okay, the woman behind you, I'm just trying to work that out. The woman behind you in the glasses.
I would just like to say, from a personal perspective, I find Boris Johnson's behaviour an absolute disgrace. From a professional perspective, I'm a frontline nurse, have worked all through the pandemic, as have many of my colleagues. I personally did not see my family for 3 months. I sat on Christmas Day on my own. It actually makes me quite emotive to think about it.
I'm sure. So hang on, just tell us about that then. So why did you not see your family for 3 months?
Because my mum is a vulnerable adult and I had to protect her. So I had to stay away from my family. I was working frontline in COVID and, you know, I feel listening to the panel tonight, I thought that this was going to be such a good and positive outcome to a lot of things, but I find that we go back to the same tittle-tattle again. And I think the bottom line here, the take-home message that I'm personally asking people to take home with them is, in a healthcare situation, it doesn't matter what side of the political divide you come from, everybody is equal.
Well, look, I think we all agree that the most important thing is the pain of the families who didn't spend those last few minutes with their loved one who was dying, who weren't able to hold their hand and be there when it mattered. And we all have had that experience at some point in our lives, and it's never easy. It's difficult for those families who weren't able to have contact with their family because they were working on the front line and trying to protect them. But what it has exposed, I think, is the deep-seated culture of entitlement at the very heart of this government. And that is down to Boris's own leadership and approach. It's as though the rest of the rules that apply to everyone else no longer apply to those people in his circle. And that wasn't just the civil servants and others, but even the way Sue Gray reflects how they spoke to the staff who worked in that building, who were also working through the pandemic and were disrespected on a routine basis, I think just speaks to that level of entitlement and disrespect for everyone and everything. You know, we said goodbye to people during the pandemic in my department. We did it with cards and emails or phone calls. It is quite possible to wish a colleague all the best without having to bring in a karaoke machine and bottles of wine and have people in altercations and throwing up on the floor. It is quite possible in a pandemic to say to somebody, I wish you every best, and send them a card. And maybe the Prime Minister should have been slightly more thoughtful in the way he conducted himself. And I have to say, Robert, I have a lot of respect for you, and we worked together in your previous role and as Minister. But how you could believe anything that Boris Johnson says at face value is beyond me at this point. If he told me it was raining, I would have to put my hand out the window to check for myself.
I'll come back to you in a minute. Man in the white shirt.
I agree what Boris Johnson's done is completely wrong, right? My difficulty, having worked in the private sector and charity sector, where we worked every day during COVID, and I brought staff in to look after the children of doctors and nurses, I won't trust any politician in Northern Ireland. In fact, if I had to hire
including the panel?
Including the panel, because every one of them have told lies on some occasion, they've cheated. There's an inability to say sorry in your party unless you follow your line. There's an inability to think for yourself as politicians. We have to get politicians who put their job above the colour of their party, and we haven't got that.
Emma.
Well, I think to go back to the question, and I actually think what we heard today, you know, about that sacrifice of so many thousands and thousands of people on the front line across the United Kingdom, you know, to keep people safe, to do a job and to do a duty. You know, it really genuinely grieves me to think that there were thousands and thousands of people who passed away with no loved one or family member or friend to hold their hand in those final moments because of those rules and regulations that are put in place to protect people and to try to stop this virus. And I think that's why people are genuinely upset when they see this type of thing. You know, and with the last comment about integrity in public life, I do believe very, very firmly lawmakers should not be lawbreakers, very, very clearly. And we've had too many examples of that. Got the Boris Johnson situation. Here in Northern Ireland, you had Michelle O'Neill and Sinn Fein bringing 5,000 people onto the streets. When I know people who couldn't even attend their parents' funeral because of the number of restrictions. It's not good enough. You have to lead by example, and we must all do better.
Peter.
The first and only duty of a leader is to make sure the culture of his organisation is right and that the organisation overall is delivering the outcomes that it needs to be doing so. Boris Johnson failed on that. The really important thing about what we learnt about Boris Johnson's behaviour throughout the pandemic is that he lies, he's reckless, and that he's incompetent. This has now been proven in the Sue Gray report. The reason why this is so important is if we now look at the way our country is run, the fact that our international reputation is being shredded, the fact that the protocol is not delivering and the negotiations aren't being sorted out. There's almost 7 million people waiting for treatment in the NHS, no more so than here in Northern Ireland. The fact that we have 56,000 people who are victims of serious crime who are waiting for their day in court. We have an economy with low growth, high tax, high interest rates. Why? Because the person running our country lies, he is reckless, and he's incompetent. That's why what we see in the Sue Gray report, what we now know for fact about the behaviour and the way that our leader of our country works is actually having a massive impact, not just on the culture in Number 10, but the way that our country is being run and perceived as a country around the world. Our country deserves better, and we will not get better until Boris Johnson is gone.
Right, I'm going to take one more question. We've got about 7 minutes left for a very big question, but there are quite a few of you asking this, so let's hear from Craig Lynn.
Is now the time for us to consider what a future new United Ireland might look like?
What are your thoughts on that?
I think it has to be a yes, regardless of your political stripe. I mean, we spent 20 minutes here talking earlier on.
What, yes to United Ireland?
No, yes to considering what it might
look
like. We spent 20 minutes talking about what the fallout from Brexit has been because we didn't consider what the future might look like after Brexit. So I'm a soft unionist, but we need to at least think about this before we decide whether we're for it or against it.
John.
Yeah, I actually welcome the way in which the question is worded because I don't think anybody, and I talk to a lot of people and I'm on a lot of debates like this, nobody is advocating for a referendum, a border poll tomorrow morning or indeed next year because that just repeats the reckless mistakes of
But that
Brexit.
is something you want to see in the future.
Oh yes, of course it is, and we've been very clear on this. We want to see the conversation which has already taken place. The fact that you're asking the question is proof of that. I think people want to know what a new Ireland looks like. I think people want to see that that conversation informed, and that's why we have called on the Irish government to convene a citizens' assembly, which will do just that. We have called on the British government to clarify that term in the Good Friday Agreement as to what would actually trigger such referendums on this island, because no matter where you are, as you've referenced, on the decision, on the question, you might be for, you might be against, or you might be somewhere in between. You need to know what it is you're voting for. You need to know what it is you're voting against. And I think that one thing that is clear, well, two actually, I think there is a border poll coming at some stage. And I also think that Brexit has been a huge catalyst for what could potentially be the breakup of the Union, the United Kingdom, as we currently see it. It's advanced that conversation
It's going to have to just be
in
reasonably
Scotland.
brief, because we've only got 5 minutes left and I need to get the rest of the
And on
panel
this
in.
island, I'll be very quick as I finish. On this island, it is about how you phrased it. It's a new Ireland. It's not about rubbing a line out of a map. It's a new Ireland where all of the protections of the Good Friday Agreement are there, no matter what your position and no matter whether you're British, Irish or neither.
Emma. Well, look, I think we need to be very careful not to buy into some spin around this. In 1998, the combined nationalist vote was around 40%. In 2022, the combined nationalist vote is still 40%. So although the leadership of Sinn Fein are trying to say that there's a momentum behind this, things haven't changed. Now, I'm a committed unionist. I'm a unionist because I believe what is best for Northern Ireland is to stay within this United Kingdom. I want to see a stronger United Kingdom where everybody feels comfortable, that works for everybody, which is why we're trying to address those really, really key structural issues. Now, if the other panel members want to join me in a conversation about how we can strengthen that union, how we can work for everybody, I'm absolutely open to that. But I'm not going to enter into discussion about the demise of Northern Ireland, the abolishing of Northern Ireland, because I don't believe it's inevitable at all. Right. I believe our future lies in the United Kingdom, and that's what I'm going to be working and fighting for.
Well, I mean, John said that Brexit was a huge catalyst for change, but it was also a huge warning about making change that isn't properly considered and thought through. And I think the last thing any of us would want is a referendum without a proper understanding of what the proposition is, how it would be funded, how it would be paid for, and what the consequences of it would be. Because with every major change, there are consequences. Emma says things haven't changed in Northern Ireland since the Good Friday Agreement, but they have. Because more and more people in Northern Ireland no longer define themselves simply as unionist or nationalist. It isn't the priority for a lot of people. Now 20% of the people in the Assembly represent those of us who don't designate as unionist or nationalist. And we have a stake in this society, but our passion is about making a better future for all of our people. United Kingdom or United Ireland, what I want to see is a united society here in Northern Ireland, and one that flourishes.
Robert.
I think to build on Naomi's point, it is fascinating to see the change in politics in Northern Ireland. We've got to ask ourselves whether the St Andrews Agreement, the Good Friday Agreement actually reflect now the reality of politics in Northern Ireland as we see this three-way split. So the question is a really good one. But I think from your point of view, you know, I'm not English, I'm a proud Welshman, and I'm really proud to be part of the UK. So I think about these issues a lot. And I think if you're sitting as a moderate unionist, which I think is the mainstream of unionism in Northern Ireland, you'll be thinking about things like, will my health service work better if there's a united Ireland? Will the public services that I expect and pay for work better? Will I have opportunities? Will my kids have the right opportunities? Will I suddenly be in a different minority position vis-à-vis the majority? How will that work? What will the electoral system be like? You're entitled to ask all these questions, but you know, if and when there was to ever to be a border poll, and I take Naomi's point about there isn't an inevitable momentum to this, I would certainly be, as a friend, as a fellow Celt, saying stay with us, because I still believe that the values that made the UK great are worth protecting and supporting.
Peter.
I too think that the way you worded the question was really helpful. Of course.
Well, do you agree with it or not?
I agree that everybody should have the right and should be considering the position of every aspect of life in the community you live in.
But the question is now the time for us to consider what a future united Ireland might look like? Do you agree?
Every day is the day where people consider these things. And the great thing about the Good Friday Agreement is it actually legislates to give you the specific right to consider these things. You know, I believe that the Union is a force for good within all parts of the United Kingdom, and together a force for good around the world. But unions, whether it's our union, whether it's the European Union or the United States of America, only works really when the centre really works and delivers for all parts of the any union. The problem we have at the moment is I do believe that the Northern Ireland is suffering from neglect from this government. We've already heard that in order for Northern Ireland and parties within it to be heard and respected by the government, you've got to act in an extreme way to be noticed. We also have only one parliament or assembly in the whole of the United Kingdom whereby the ministerial code can be broken with impunity, where domestic and international law can be broken. And we see the kind of behaviour of that government regularly, and that's in Westminster. So we really need to make sure, if we're going to save the Union, that we make Westminster deliver for all parts of the Union, particularly here in Northern Ireland, which is suffering from neglect, and Westminster becomes a magnetic place where you want to go and solve problems and do business. At the moment, it looks quite repulsive, because the person and the people running government are repulsive.
Right. Lots of you have got your hands up. I'm afraid on this huge question we have run out of time, so forgive me, I won't be able to come to you. Forgive me for that. Our hour is up. Thank you very much to the panel for coming on this evening. Thank you to you for coming along here in Belfast. It's been great to see you and to hear what you've got to say. And of course, thank you to you at home for watching. From Question Time in Belfast. Bye-bye.